Hi, Dr. Lyons here, of course, and today I'm going to be making a graph of some data that I had laying around using Excel 2010. And my experience with Excel is it does not generally provide the default formatting settings that would result in a attractive and useful engineering graph. And I'm going to be just showing you how I go about creating the right format that I expect students to use in their reports. I'm going to show a couple of things here in my book to sort of give you an idea of where we're going, and you can see how Excel can approach that. So I've got my textbook here open to a page with a graph on it. There's two graphs here actually, and just want to talk about some of the features that are in this graph that are important to make a note of so that we can see how we can reproduce these in Excel. Sorry, my phone doesn't focus real well on this, but we'll hopefully get through this. The graph has y in meters plotted on the y-axis and t in seconds plotted along the x or horizontal axis. And there's a bunch of data points where y was measured at different times. First thing to note is that the axes have labels and units, t representing time and s representing seconds. Y position m is the unit of meters. So that's one thing that Excel doesn't give you by default are actual labels on your axes. Second thing to notice is that the font size of the numbers on the axis and the labels on the axes are all the same. And that's also a feature of Excel that you have to customize. Excel decides for you arbitrarily what fonts and sizes you should use. And so we're going to talk about how to set Excel up to give us the same font everywhere. And another thing that you want to see in this particular chart is that each data point is discrete. There are no lines connecting any of the data points. And for experimentally measured data, we will always represent the data points as discrete points with no lines. In other words, we are not making an assumption about what happens between the first data point and the second data point. We only have measurements at each individual time. And let's see, another thing that you'll notice about this chart or graph and other ones in engineering textbooks and reports is that there's a box all the way around the outside of the data set, and that there are tick marks indicating where the axes, or where the labels are recorded on the axes. And there's no grid lines going across like a grid pattern. That's something Excel thinks that we want to have, but we really don't. So I'll show you how to remove those from Excel. And let's see, what else is worth mentioning here? That's all I want to say about that particular chart. I've got another chart over here, and you can see some common features. Again, we've got a y and an x-axis. The y has both a label P and a unit in inches of mercury, and the x-axis has a label and a unit. And the data points, which are the experiment in this graph, are symbols. So it kind of looks like there is a line connecting these data points, but if you look closely, you'll see that some of the data points are slightly above that curve and some slightly below. And the curve in this particular chart is a theoretical relationship between the p and y variables. And in theory, because the theory is continuous, we know it at every point, so we have a solid line with no data points representing the theory. But the data points are discrete data points and labeled as experiment. The thing in the upper right-hand corner is called a legend, and you want the font size of the legend to also be the same size as the X and Y axis labels, and we will get into that in Excel on how to make all that happen. Now I'm going to go over to the computer and let's get started. This is the data that I had lying around. Well, the first column is A, the position that I measured the reactions. And R1 is a force measurement, and R2 is a force measurement. As A ranged from 0 to 10, R1 ranged from about 200 to almost 0, 196 to 2. And R2 has the opposite trend. It started off small and got bigger, and it ranged from 5 to 202. So I'm going to put this data into Excel and then generate a chart.
Okay, so now that I'm sitting at my computer, I'm going to open up Excel 2010, and most of you know this is called a workbook or a book, and the book is made up in this case of 3 sheets. Sheet 1, you can see the tabs down here in the bottom left-hand corner. Sheet 2 and Sheet 3. The data I'm going to put in is going to be in Sheet 1. It's generally good practice to put some notes in the actual sheet, and this data my 3 columns of data are A, which has the units of inches, R1, which has the units of pounds, and R2, which has the units of pounds as well. So if you remember, I had 3 columns of data, and it's generally just easiest to put them in order. As I type the first number and then press enter, the cell reference moves down automatically. So all I have to do is put 2, enter, 4, enter, 6, enter, 8, enter, 10, enter. And then using the mouse, I relocate my cell position to the next column. And my numbers here were 196, enter, 165, enter, 118, enter, 81, enter, 42, enter, 2, enter. And my last set of data was 5, enter, 41, enter, 82, enter, 124, enter, and 159, and enter, and then my last one is 202. So usually at this point I spend a few minutes verifying that I have entered the data correctly, comparing that back to my data sheet, because after I start manipulating things, if I find out later that I have made a mistake, then sometimes I have to go all the way back to the beginning. Now, most of us have put in data in Excel before. I think it's probably a good idea to save this as we're going along. And I'm just going to put this particular document in my teaching folder for 101. And this is my data 8/5/2015. And because I don't want to lose what I've done as I'm going along, so I'm going to periodically save it. Now I'm going to create a graph or chart from this data, and the procedure that I generally follow is, after I have my data all entered in, I select the entire range. To select the range, you put the mouse on the first cell and you hold down the mouse button, which is, I believe, the left mouse button, and you just drag the cell to include the entire range. The chart that I'm going to put into is under the Insert tab, and so I go Insert, and I've got a number of tabs right here. The confusing thing for me and for a lot of new users is the presence of this line graph. In mechanical engineering, you're hardly ever going to want to use the line graph. You're always going to use a scatter graph, and the difference between the line graph and the scatter graph is that the scatter graph actually uses your data for your x-axis, and the line graph just sets some arbitrarily evenly spaced number. So after I mouse over the scatter and click that, I open up some options right here. And the default option that you're usually going to use when you're plotting data is going to be scatter with only markers. It allows you to compare pairs of values, and you use it when the values are not in the x-axis order or when they represent separate measurements. In the case of our data, because of the way I recorded it systematically, the values are in a increasing x-axis order, which is how A increases. A is going to be on the x-axis in this case. But they do represent separate measurements, so that I'm going to select that. After I click enter on the type of graph, this is what I get, and it's got some of the features that I need. If you remember, we were looking at the book, but it doesn't have all of them. And so now I've got to tell Excel to do what I want it to do. The first thing that I want to do is I'm going to get rid of these lines that go across the from the y-axis, and I just selected one of those, and I pressed the delete button, and they're gone. It's already annoying to me that the font is so small. So if you click inside the box of that's defined by the coordinate axes, you select the range and everything that's in that box. If you click outside the box, I'm clicking right here. Didn't click it too many times. If I click it right here, then that selects the entire chart. The way to change the font size on everything is to come back up to the menu bar and select Home. And I guess I like the Calibri font okay, but it's too small. And so I can select something larger. And since I'm probably going to be shrinking this down when I put it into a graph, I'm going to select something that's almost cartoonish. Certainly nothing ridiculous, but something that is going to look pleasing when it's about half as big as this. So if I select a 20 font size and I shrink it down, when I insert it into a document, that will give me about a 10-point font, which should still be readable for most people. It's going to be the same with the data points. I don't like the size of those. Those are a little small. So if I select one of those, it opens up the series. And if I right click on that, I think I get a option for Format Data Series. And Format Data Series gives me something called Marker Options. And it's using the automatic setting. I like to use a default one. The square is okay. The font size or the marker size needs to get a little bit bigger. Let me see what I'm doing over here. I kind of like something around 12 for that. I don't like the fact that my markers are red because I don't have a color printer, so I'm going to change the marker fill to a solid fill and then select the black color. And now I need to do the same procedure with the other set of data, so I'm going to select the other data range, right click it, Format Data Series, Marker Options, built in. The shape is okay. I'm going to need to increase that a little bit and make them about the same size. Just eyeballing over here, that looks like a pretty good marker size. Maybe I'll go to 14. And then I want to change that color to a solid fill and also black. If the markers aren't distinguishable from each other in black, then you're going to have problems when you're sharing this data. When I look closely to this, I see I forgot to do something. There's a red border around my R2 data points, and there's a blue border around my R1s. So I'm going to go back into Format Data Series, Marker Fill. That's going to be line color. And nope, that's going to be marker line color. Marker line color, and I'm just going to say don't give me a line around that. And also with this, I really don't want a blue line around that. And so my marker line color is going to be no line. If you like a line but you want to make it black, you can select solid line and make it black. But I'm just going to say no line because my symbols are completely readable. Looks like when I just clicked this, I just moved it a little bit. So let me just click this undo button up here. Yeah. And so sometimes that happens. So I just moved it back to the default setting where that is. So does this chart look good? I don't know. I think my data points are still a little bit large here for the black one. So I'm going to go back to marker options, and I'm just going to reduce that in one size. And now those two data ranges look pretty close to one another. Okay, so what else do we see here with the default settings? I have got because I selected the entire range of data over here, the words that were at the top of the first column of Y data and the second column of Y data automatically appear as the legends over here. And that's kind of helpful because I can come back here and I can change the word in the spreadsheet, and it updates the legend over here. Just to show you how you could do that in case you mess that up. Otherwise, you've got to get, and so that's a shortcut to go ahead and put your legends in the data, and the legends will default on the graph. Let's see, what else do I need to do? At this point, the Excel has not told me what is actually what are the units on either the y-axis or the x-axis. So to get those, I've got to find the graph menu bar again, and I remember that it was under Insert. No, that's not working. So I'm going to just, there you go. So if I go back and I click the graph, it brings back up these chart tools. If I click off the graph, it takes me to the spreadsheet tools. So clicking the chart tools, I have some submenus: Design, Layout, and Format. And I'm pretty happy with my format, but my layout's not good. I don't have chart titles, axes titles, and legends and things like that the way I want them. So I'm going to go to the axes function first. If you'll remember in my data that I had collected, my data in terms of the A range went from 0 to 10. But Excel has decided to give me a chart that goes from 0 to 12, and 12 doesn't exist in my data. So I'm going to my axis, and I'm going to edit my primary horizontal axis, which is the one at the bottom. And I found that I have to go to the more primary axis options. I want to change, so these are basically the default settings on the range that the axis goes to. It goes from 0 to 12 in increments of 2. And I want my maximum value to just go to 10. So I have to click Fixed and change that to 10. And I want my major units to go in steps of 1. So that's going to give me a finer gradient on here in terms of steps in the unit. And that's for doing some analysis of the data later. So the next step is to put some titles on the axis so that I know exactly what's plotted on the y or vertical axis and the x or horizontal axis. So I need to find the graph tools again. So I must have clicked on something. So if I select the chart area, the chart tools pop up here, and I go in again under Layout, and I want to insert some axis titles. So first I'll put the primary horizontal axis title on it. I want the title to appear below the axis. That displays the title below the horizontal axis, and it also resizes the chart, so I've got room for it. Excel gives me a default title of axis title, which is not very informative, so I'm going to select all that and backspace to delete it. And what did we have plotted on here? 0 to 10, that's A. I'm going to give a little more information about it that I happen to know because where the data came from. So that's the distance A in inches. And press enter. No, don't press enter because that just makes the stuff move around. Instead, come up here to your chart area and just click it. And now I need to insert a vertical axis title. And I've got some choices here. The rotated title axis is the one you want to use because it displays the words so you can read them if you cocked your head to the left. But I need to give that a little more information. Now, I've got to decide what I'm going to call this because I've got two things plotted on this chart. I've got both R1 and R2 plotted on here. I don't want to call this R1, but what they both are represent from my experiment are reaction forces. So I'm going to give them a little title that's descriptive. I call it reaction forces, and units there are pound. So that is good. I'm going to click save so I don't lose my work. And the other thing I guess we need to put on here is a box all the way around the data set. That's a pretty standard format. I believe that I will select the plot area by clicking in the middle here, and you can see that opens up the selection box. I'm going to go to plot area and more plot options, and I'm going to give it a border. Certainly I don't want to fill, that's no good. I want a border, and I'm going to give it a solid line and a black color because that's the way I roll. And now I have a border all the way around my chart, but gee, that for some reason that came out a little bit darker than I wanted it to. So let me look under my plot options again, border styles. That is going to get turned into a 1-point width line, just like it was before I inserted a plot area border. And I'm not sure why Excel thought I should make it fatter. So the next thing I see I need to do is redo my font size again. Because when I inserted my titles, the reactions forces and the distance came out bold. So I'm again select my plot area, go to home, and there. So if I click bold, I can a couple times, I can make everything the same. And just to double check, make everything 20 again. Now my legend over here, I want to have a box around it too, so I'll right click it, go format legend, border color, solid line, black. And what you will often see in a engineering textbook or report is the legend is presented inside the plot area, usually up here in the right. If there's some data that would cover up, it's acceptable to put it over here in the upper left-hand corner. And if both places are not available because you have data on the chart, it's acceptable to leave it over here on the right. But nobody is going to look for a legend down here, so don't do that. Just leave it where it is if it doesn't fit in the top. So that's what we want to have. You notice one thing is there's not a title at the top. I'm not putting this in a PowerPoint slide. I'm going to put this in a report. And so I'm going to have a descriptive caption underneath the chart. I'm not going to have a title at the top. Let's save this, and let's go ahead and put this in a Word document. So I'm going to open up Word and come back to Excel, and you just select the plot area, right click, copy, and open up Word. And instead of, when I right click on in Word to paste, I've got options. And you generally want to avoid the first few settings. Use destination theme and embed the workbook. I don't want to embed the workbook. The formatting comes in sort of messed up. If I resize it, things get all wacky, and I really can't see anything that I want to do. So I will right click and paste it as a picture. If you format it as a picture, what you get in Word looks exactly like it did finally in the format in Excel. Of course, I can't edit it anymore. I'll have to go back to Excel and then copy and paste it back to Word if I need to correct something. But I don't have to worry about the format getting messed up as my Word document gets resized, formatted, emailed to somebody, and that. Yeah, so I think I'm done with that for now. I'm not gonna save that right now because I'm not ready to. Come back to Excel. Yeah, so that's my chart. I think I like it. It's about as close as I can get to a drawing or graph that represents a professional engineering product. So we'll do one more save, and I'll exit. And thank you for watching.